I know for me, I needed to also sustain a lifestyle. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And this is where I hate the narrative of the starving artist. It is not romantic to be starving. It is not romantic to be, like, even if you are pursuing your passion but not being able to pay your bills or your rent or whatever else it might be, it's not something that anybody should strive for. And at the end of the day, let's say even if you are able to make ends meet, but you're doing a lot of gigs that you don't like because you don't have the flexibility and you don't have the financial cushion, you are going to burn out. So that's why a lot of people who do speak to me and they do tell me about their situations, sometimes like I do say, hey, why not like just hold on to the job for another year, have that financial cushion so that when you are all in on your business, you are able to say yes to what you want to and no to what you don't, right? Because artists especially, we're people of passion. We don't want to just do whatever job comes our way. We want to do the things that really ignite that in us. So what I found has worked for me is to definitely ride the wave. There are ways to capitalize on things. So for example, like when the Happy Place thing happened, that was a little bit of serendipity as well. They found me through Instagram, messaged me, contracted me to do one mural, and then eventually that turned into I think 7 or 8. So
Amazing.
when I wrapped that up, they were like, "Hey, do you want to be on TV in like 2 days?" I was like, "Sure," not really knowing I'd be on CP24.
Yeah.
So then after that happened, I was chatting with one of my friends actually, and he was like, "Oh, like like things are going so good for you," and he said something to allude to the fact that like it's like a now thing, right? And like I appreciated what he said, and then it really made me realize like I don't want this to be a now thing. I want this to be a new level of my business. I want this to be the start of so much PR. So what I decided to do is I decided to go back that day, go to my inbox and basically write a few emails and send them off saying, hi, I was just, let's say, to my local city, I know to The Guardian, I sent an email saying, hi, just this past week, I did Media Week with Happy Place. We just launched their pop up. I was the artist behind all of their murals. And I just interviewed with such and such, such and such, and such and such. I'm actually born and raised in the city. And if you'd like to do a profile, I would love that, right? So um, you have to make it a win-win. And then I basically just made that a new portion of my business that I decided every time I was going to do something big, I would reach out in that way. So my next big project after that was the ROM. And the ROM gave me the Rotunda room, which was really big. And I got to display my art there. I got to make like this like Diwali interactive piece. And it was the first time a Rangoli had ever been brought to the ROM. So it was really cool. So I decided to reach out to like all of these South Asian newspapers and say, hi, my name's Jasmine. I'm an artist. I just created the first ever Rangoli for the ROM, and it was featured there on such and such date. Would love to have some coverage. And I got, I think, 3 or 4 media pieces out of that as well. When I quit corporate, I didn't tell anybody for 3 months that I was going to do art.
What did they think you were doing for 3 months?
Oh, they thought I was going to my job.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because
How's today? It was tough. It was busy,
I'm not even kidding. And it was the hardest, like saying things to my grandma. She would call me and I'd be like, yeah, the commute was bad, and I felt so guilty. But I also knew that the internal voices I had in my head that were already telling me I couldn't do it were loud enough. I definitely did not need like any further voices telling me any, like, even as well wishing as they may be, sometimes they're not helpful and sometimes they're not what you need to hear, right? So you really need to nurture yourself and protect yourself sometimes. So that was a time where I was like, I'm going to give myself 3 months. If I make it work, I'll tell everybody. And that's exactly what happened. So when I did tell them, I was able to say, hey guys, by the way, I did this, and you know what? I've been living, like, and I'm paying my mortgage and I'm paying my bills, and I really like it, and then that way as well, like, you're giving others who really care about you the peace of mind. So that's how I did it. I know like everybody's going to do it in their own way. I know it might not suit everybody, but sometimes you just have to not only quiet your inner voice, but also set some boundaries so you don't get others' voices in your head too. Part of my daily routine, which is another huge thing that I credit to my success touch black in terms of being an entrepreneur, is my morning routine. So I wake up. Yeah, I wake up. I have my tea. Now that it's summer, I have my tea in my backyard on the patio set.
Wait, so what time are you waking up?
Oh, it varies. It varies. Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I worked really hard through university, and I also worked really hard in corporate, and a lot of that came with really early start times.
Mhm.
And one thing that was always on my mind was there has to be another lifestyle outside of this. Like there
Okay.
has to be a lifestyle where you can sleep 8 to 9 hours, wake up
Mhm.
with nature's call or whatever it might be, and then have your tea and journal and meditate and then start your day.
Okay.
So that's one thing that I'm uncompromising on
Mhm.
is like if let's say if I have a huge mural project, I'll go in at 11, 12, 1, whatever works, just so that I know that I've started my day in the best way possible. I didn't start it rushed, because that was one thing I really hated about
Mhm.
corporate. I felt like every morning I was working felt like a rushed morning,
Yeah.
so like now that I'm able to kind of scale back and have my tea slowly, sip on it, and then I journal. So
What do you journal
how
about?
does it yeah, so like I do it in a more structured way that suits me best. So 3 things you're grateful for,
Mhm.
and then 3 things you're going to do that day, and then one affirmation. When I was trying to figure it out, I was like, whoa, what am I going to do today? I'll sleep in until 11, and then I'll watch some TV, and I don't even watch
Yeah.
TV. I internalize everything I watch, so I try not to watch it. Otherwise I'm pissed about like what I saw on TV, and then I'm
Mhm.
also scared because I watched a horror movie. So I try to stay away from it. But at the beginning, it was just like so much free time, right? And
Mhm.
especially like going from something that was so structured, like a office job, to something that suddenly for 5 days a week you didn't have anywhere to be at a certain time unless
Mhm.
you had booked something in particular that required you to be off site, which in the art world a lot of your commissions are done from home,
Yeah.
right, or in your studio. So there's no obligation to wake up at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So it took me a while to get into the groove of it, but then when I did, it really was, introspecting and thinking about like what do I require to be the best version of myself. And that's where I came up with all of these, this basically list of things that I try to do before I start my day, because they get my mind in the right mindset.
Mhm.
Otherwise I would be running wild and free. And I think that's where really strong boundaries come into play as well. So you can't just say like, oh, I'm going to give myself 3 years to make this work. You have to say, I need to make it work by X date, or I'm going to do
I like that.
something else.
I like deadlines for yourself.
Yeah, you have to hold yourself accountable. And I feel like deadlines is a fantastic way of doing that. It just makes sure that it's top of mind for you and it's urgent.
Mhm.
Otherwise, yeah, like rosé is tempting, TV is tempting,
Mhm.
movies are tempting, going out with your girls at like lunchtime is tempting.
Yeah. Are there like entrepreneur podcasts or books or things that you do that kind of keep you motivated or inspire you?
I love Lewis Howe's podcast, The School of Greatness. He interviews a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who are at the top of their game, and they just talk about everything, right? Like they talk about their daily routines, they talk about their relationships, they talk about side hustles, anything you can think of. It's just such a wide array of topics. So I find more often than not he's talking about something that I really like, and it gets me motivated for the day as well. And these, how they say like you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I feel like every time I listen to a podcast, I'm like, we're spending time together, we're friends now.
But it's true though, because even if you don't have a circle that maybe are of people that are like-minded, if you listen to a podcast or you read a book, it's kind of like you're bringing that into your life.
For sure. Like even us having this conversation, and if somebody's listening in, like they absolutely are a part of this conversation. I think I wanted it really bad at that point. I was truly like, I couldn't fathom working in a structured, typical kind of corporate atmosphere for the next
For the rest
few
of your
decades.
life. Yeah. I'm sorry to paint that picture, but I'm like, you're young, so it's a good 40, 50 years ahead of you here.
So I just couldn't fathom it anymore, and it was to the point where I was like, I need to make this work. I have different sources of revenue, but it's going to be different for every artist and the way you choose to structure your business. So the way I chose to do it was, I also knew I love variety. I love it. Like I don't want any two of my days to be the same, and I also like just the natural path of my career as an artist was so different. Like I taught art at the Living Arts Center for a little bit. I sold shoes internationally on Etsy. I did henna for weddings, and then I did Gismith and Sahag, and then eventually I was doing destination weddings. The compilation of things is what has made me successful as an artist. I don't think if I put all my eggs into one basket, let's say if tomorrow I was like, oh, I'm just going to create art collections, which is essentially you paint it in your studio and then you send it out to galleries or you sell it online, like however you choose to sell it, but you already have a pre-made product and then you sell it. You price it yourself and you sell it, right? I don't think just that as the only portion of my business would have worked. I needed all of these other portions to sustain me. Now that might change in the future. Like I feel like murals are the biggest chunk of my business. They make me the most profit. So who knows, like maybe like next year that'll become so big that it'll be the only thing I can focus on. But up until then, I truly do appreciate the variety, and like it keeps me from being stagnant, and it also keeps me from having such a stringent routine that I'm not excited anymore. So pricing yourself as an artist, no doubt, is probably the most complicated thing that I had to do. It's one of those things that you kind of have to play with until you feel comfortable, because the biggest thing I found about artists are they do often underprice themselves. So, I mean,
because you just never want to seem like you're pricing yourself out of the market.
But then you seem like such a noob if your price is so below the market.
It's that like, balance.
Yeah, and it's like, would a gallery ever take you on if you're pricing something so undervalued that they're like, hey,
$10.
like, you're kind of cheap. Yeah,
I will let it go for $10.
You're cheapening yourself, and then you're cheapening all the other artists in that space.
That's true,
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating for galleries. I think there are so many other ways to make a lucrative business out of art, but I'm just giving you one example where like you can't have such a low price either. So I think the best, like for a beginner, the best way to gauge how much you should be charging is by looking at other esteemed artists who have already made it, who make similar artwork to yours. And you have to bet on yourself more than anybody else would. This was something that took me some time to learn, but truly, like, your friends and your family, they can root for you.
Yeah.
But nobody should be rooting for you more than you're rooting for yourself. If you're not putting work in every single day to see your business progress, and if you're not the one who says to them, like, hey, I know you might not support this, but I'm about to leave my job and do this full time, then I don't think the ambition will carry you as far as you should go. One of the few people that I actually spoke to it about before I made the decision to go into the arts or quit corporate was I sat down with a previous director and a previous senior manager from one of my previous companies, and I told them what it was, and one I chose because she is such an optimist, and the other I chose because I thought he would counter argue me.
Okay.
But when I did explain it to him, he was like, yeah, 100% you need to go for this. And I was like, whoa. I was like expecting like we could go back and forth, you could test how like firm my belief is in this. I could know then, you know, like, am I really serious about this? Because sometimes you do need somebody to bounce ideas off of. But I've definitely been lucky to have a few mentors in my career. So I think you do need a few different people that you respect in different capacities. One can be very like independent. Another person can be very, I don't know, career oriented. Another person can be very
like different
politically
backgrounds,
motivated. I don't know. You know, like you gotta choose different people, but like people you connect with and who you can speak easily with. The number one way I kind of judge myself is like, does the conversation flow? Because I feel like anybody who the conversation flows with, they're my friend now. Like,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Because I feel like that type of connection, you don't get it with every single person. So when I do, like, I really try to make the effort to keep that person in my life. Yeah. And I do feel like our entire lives are about connection.